what is bringing forward. I don't believe here that Supervisor Delbar has been supportive of efforts to create a CAC in the past 9 years that I've been on the board trying to move these things along. It's interesting to see now that we are making assignments of Mendocino Arts Center. We're making adjustments without any public input whatsoever on that. I do not feel that it was appropriate for planning staff to meet privately with Supervisor Delbar to draft this. I think what you've done here is in fact illegal. I think that kind of assistance shows if you're going to talk about, we've been accused of being a cabal up here. My God, what do you call it when an outgoing supervisor in the last 8 hours of his last board meeting gets together with the planning department folks to write a revision of the Mendocino Town Plan? And we're talking about an art center that is the very heart of the village of Mendocino. To my colleagues, don't you understand anything about the village of Mendocino? Don't you understand anything about the heart of Mendocino, its history? There are people who regard this as a sacred place, and I share that view. It's not because I'm making more money by renting out 4 units on a regular basis, as has been admitted here by the owner, but we're now facilitating the opportunity not only to make more money, to do so, I guess this would be what, quasi-legally? Or have we just passed an amnesty or presented an amnesty opportunity for these people who have, quote, gone through hell, unquote? People who have been concerned about the future of Mendocino Village and its value, to keep it from being turned into a Disneyland, from being turned into Trinket Town, to make sure that people can afford to live there and not be overrun by people that rent out their basement if they had an opportunity to anybody who comes along with $400 to spare over any given weekend. I first want to ask County Council if this drafting of this particular element here, if it were passed, the drafting is okay. I'm not objecting to that, but I sure as heck am objecting to the fact that it has been put into a form here, an alternative motion that makes community input a joke, would undercut plans and efforts on the part of the Arts Center, the heart of Mendocino Village. Problematic. But again, I guess up here we just, in the last minutes of our dying gasps, boy, I'm looking forward to when I leave this board and can get a few things through for a few of the people who I think have gone through hell. Maybe that'd be an interesting time. But the reality here is I think this is inappropriate. To County Council, through the chair, I'd like some comment on this particular, does this further muddy the waters? Forget about the planning part of it, forget about the public input part of it. I guess those are just being tossed out. This is characteristic of what has gone on for 10 years that has created this situation. But what does this paragraph really say, and what does the first 10 or 12 words of number 3 do to the proposed alternative? This is not the alternative. This is the alternative with bells and whistles and maybe some whipped cream on the lead tuba player.
Well, again, as I stated earlier, with respect to the Art Center and the 19 rooms that are allocated the Art Center, I think that, yes, the planning team and staff need to review whether or not it's appropriate for the Art Center to be within that particular table. But I strongly object and don't feel it's appropriate for us to take action today to move those rooms around, particularly when we haven't even given the Art Center any notice of that intent, regardless of whether those rooms are being used or not. And it's not clear, I haven't heard from the Art Center that they don't need the 19 rooms. They may not be utilizing all of them at the present time, but there's no indication or evidence that they actually don't need the 19 rooms. So those rooms have to go somewhere else if we're going to pull them out of this table and move them around. So, and that calls for some sort of analysis. I think staff, in terms of meeting with the supervisor, we're just trying to clarify the motion and, you know, so that we can at least put together some findings for the motion that he wants to present. But again, I think we're missing the point here. We're excluding the process, and we haven't even provided notice to the Art Center that we're even doing this. And I think it's inappropriate from that standpoint, and I'll leave it at that.
Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To that point, Council, I wanted to know before Supervisor Colfax's question, my question is, what are the findings, and do we require findings? I mean, you're talking about the waters being muddied, but I remember the board's discussion to some degree in 2005, and we talked about, yes, there were these additional units, and yes, that would be a consideration once we got through the process in terms of possibly reallocating those. I feel like this is not in anyone's interest to act on this today, but what are the findings? You said staff worked to help draft this alternative motion. Where are the findings? Where are the findings to do in this further evidence section that talks about, all it says, to me, the only findings I'm reading is saying that the Mendocino Arts Center have not been fully developed. And so we're proceeding to reassign 4 of the 6 units. Doesn't talk about what happens to the other 2. They just hang out there, I guess. Because this provides balance and stays within the minimum numbers available on the table. What are the findings that we are using, this body, to vote on this? What are the findings that we're using to take this action? I don't see them.
You're using that one highlighted finding, evidence supplied during the public hearing process. Now, you can determine whether or not you can make that finding, but that's the proposed finding that will address the rearrangement of the rooms within the table.
So we're not going to be seeing some findings come down the path later that somehow this board is signed on to by this action today that further discusses this. I hope not. I mean, this action needs to stand on its own today, right?
You need to determine whether you can make that finding.
Well, I think it's absolutely absurd. If anyone was listening to your comments, it's absurd. We can't make the findings. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. Thank you.
Back to the maker of the motion, discussion on that additional language.
I don't know what else I can say, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of unfortunate that we get beat up for doing our job and doing the same thing that's been common practice, but hey, whatever. I guess we're easy targets at this point, but so be it. The tables show in the record that there were 13 units. Table shows 13 units. Table shows 13 units. Then table shows 13 with 6 potential. Here's the potential. It's for sale. It's a, quote, one of the few remaining undeveloped parcels in the village of Mendocino. It's for sale. So at some point, our responsibility is to make a decision. And the data that we have, I think, very clearly shows that there are 6 units that do not exist. The Arts Council is not unaware that these have been on the table. They've been on the table and discussed since this application was first heard in '97. So it's not a surprise. But at some point, we need to make a decision, and that's what I'm willing to do here.
Supervisor Pinchas.
Just a quick comment on the findings issue. I think it's clear in the last sentence of motion number 2 is that the board finds the project consistent with the goals and policies of the Mendocino Town Plan. Isn't that what this is really about? The politics aside and the value of the rooms and all that. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? And I think we are.
Supervisor Kovacs.
Just one small footnote. The Arts Council has no